From deep in the heart of Central Texas, it's the Best of the Outdoors podcast. Brought to you by Texas Fish and Game Magazine, the voice of the Texas outdoor nation. I'm your humble host, Dustin Warncke. Excited that you guys are here for this show. The last show we did was the NRA coverage, and I appreciate you hanging out with me for those 3 podcasts that I banged out Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of that show earlier this month. And we're back with another episode. This is another mobile podcast that I did, kind of like I did with the NRA show, but we're about fishing. And I apologize, I've not had a freshwater fishing episode for a few months now, and it's just because we've had a lot going on in saltwater and wildlife stuff. The guests that I've had on, Chester Moore and our friend Daryl Palmer from Double D Extreme Tackle, and fantastic guest to have on. So we were kind of doing our saltwater series. We'll continue that, but I wanted to definitely get into some bass fishing and some white bass and hybrid striper and that kind of stuff, and then obviously catfishing. So what I've got here is a podcast that I did with Dennis Martin and Terry Tubbs from Crosswater Outfitters, which is my fishing ministry that I talk about all the time. We had an event back in April, and I decided what better time would it be to get together with those 2 guys and record a podcast. So that's what we did, and this is a great show coming up with those 2 and myself and my mobile microphone and our headphones and everything else like that. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I've got a picture of us while we were recording that Dennis took, kind of a selfie, and then I've got pictures of Terry and Dennis all in the show notes. You can check those out at fishgame.com/podcast. Check us out that way. However you're listening, though, please review us. Please, if you like what you hear, please give us a review, and please tell a friend about the show. That helps us grow and get to new heights and attract new sponsors and that kind of stuff too, and really helps us connect and spread the Texas Outdoor Nation message. So that really makes me happy when we get to do that more and more. So anyway, the podcast is slowly growing. I'm just so excited to have you guys on board, that you listen. I love each and every one of you guys, and I appreciate each and every one of you, especially the feedback that you give me on Facebook. If you have not done so, hit me up on Facebook, add me as a friend. I've got a personal page there. It's open for everybody. Dustin Warncke, Warncke, and that is free. Obviously, Facebook's free to connect with me on there. This podcast is free to download every 2 weeks, and got a really good one for you this week. So without further ado, here we go with our podcast with recording with Terry Tubbs and Dennis Martin. Here we go. So I'm here at Lake Belton Outdoor Recreational Area at Fort Hood with Dennis Martin and Terry Tubbs. How are you gentlemen doing?
Great. Good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
And Dennis, you're a listener to the show, so I'm even more excited about having you.
True.
Because you actually will tune in and listen to this stuff. I'm sure you will now too, right, Terry?
You bet.
Okay. Terry's like, what's a podcast? No, I'm just kidding. So basically, just tell us a little bit, Terry, first, since you're one of the co-founders of Crosswaters, how this started, how we basically, approach one of these events for the soldiers and their families and that kind of stuff.
Well, we've been doing this for about 11 years, and it started out with me and a good friend of mine just taking a group of guys from our Bible study fishing one weekend, and it kind of got opened up to a few other people, and somebody else from the internet that heard we was going to be there showed up, and one of our guys led him to Christ on the porch.
Wow.
And so we kind of opened our eyes and said, hey, we can really do something sharing God's message through our passion of fishing.
Cool.
And so we started just meeting people on the internet, running into people we knew, that guys that wouldn't come into church.
Right. But would go on the outdoors.
They would go on the lake.
Right,
so we'd take them on the lake for a weekend, and we would love on them. We'd do devotions in the morning.
Right.
And that's kind of how we got started. We brought a guy along that I met at a garage sale. He had a garage sale. Had a little fishing stuff. I bought a little boat from him, and he was a vet, and he was retired age, and we brought him along, and he's the one that got us hooked up with Wounded Warriors at Fort Hood.
Cool. The Warriors in Transition Brigade is who we work with here in Fort Hood, and we do these events every October and April, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then we do a Friends and Neighbors, at least one of those a year on Lake Conroe, which is where the big blue cats live. And then we do a thing for Texas Wounded Warriors. Is that right, too?
Yes, sir.
I haven't been to one of those yet on Lake Buchanan.
Yes.
So most of this is around Central Texas and East Texas. But, Dennis, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to the ministry.
Yeah, so I had actually known Terry for quite some time through the hockey community.
That's right.
Since about 99, 2000, we played hockey against each other and then together. So we had known each other, and I had always known Terry as a good Christian man. And eventually my kids got me into fishing, and this was probably around, that would have been 2013.
Uh-huh.
And that's a whole other story in and of itself.
Right.
I hooked up with Terry at the hockey rink, and he said, "Hey, I noticed that you like fishing and that you just bought a boat." And he said, "We got a fishing ministry. I'd like to invite you to come out to one of our events." It happened to be one of the Lake Conroe events.
Right.
And as he was saying this, I remember my first thought was, "Fishing ministry? What are you talking about?"
Yeah, when you say that, people are like, "Is that a thing? Is that real?"
Yeah, the thing was just inconceivable to me at the time. But I went out and I had such a wonderful time. And mind you, it was 20 degrees the whole time. The wind was howling out of the north.
This was Lake Conroe. I was there that year.
Yeah, it was Lake Conroe. That's where I met you for the first time.
2013, I think, right?
2013,
Wow,
December 2013.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think most other people would have been miserable, but two things about that. First, it was just so much fun.
Sure.
Terry and his dad are wonderful, wonderful men to hang out with. Everyone in Crosswater is.
Right.
And you could just see this glimpse of the glory of God in this event, the way that God worked in people's lives and
Right.
shaped them. And I remember this distinctly. I went up to Terry and the other co-founder, Brian Nerium. And I said, I just bought a bass boat. It's not big. It's not anything like the boats you guys are running out here. I said, but if you ever need me to bring a boat out,
right.
I'd love to be a boat captain. And Brian looked at me and he said, Terry and I were just praying about this 10 minutes ago.
Wow.
For reliable captains to join this ministry,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been with it ever since.
Yeah, no, it's addictive. I mean, you get to see the transformation that people go through fishing and through our ministry work and stuff. And I mean, it's life changing to a lot of the soldiers that we serve, because a lot of them don't get the opportunity to go on, fishing trips like this, and maybe not have a boat or not have access and so on and so forth. And it's just something I think that's very beneficial to what we do. So I mean, it's we all love God in this ministry, but we also all love fishing. So it's kind of a melding of those two worlds. I think it goes together real nice.
Yeah, I tell the soldiers all the time when we start these events, we love fishing, we love people, and we love God, and this is almost a custom-built opportunity to combine those things into one deal. And how can you pass that up?
Sure. Sure. So we're out here this weekend. There's a front that pushed in last night, right?
Yeah.
And so it went from being in the 70s, I guess. I didn't even check the temperature, down to what was it this morning?
Yeah, it's 54 right now. It was in the low 80s yesterday.
Only in Texas, right?
Yeah.
So, but yesterday I just had to tell this story. Your boat caught a 32-pound yellow catfish that was eating a catfish that was on the jug line.
Yeah, it had a blue cat in its mouth that was probably a couple of pounds by itself. I mean, that fish was well large enough that we would have kept it in the basket to eat it. And this fish had just gone to town on it and chomped on it. Right.
No, that's crazy. And I cleaned that fish last night right when the storm and everything blew through. That was an interesting experience. But you were there with me, Dennis. I appreciate that, and that was cool. So, Terry, just give me the basic rundown of what you do on the Central Texas lakes like this. As far as, do you do a lot of hybrid white bass fishing, or what kind of? I haven't done a freshwater show in a while, so.
Yeah, I do a little bit of every kind of fishing. I do a little bit of black, not much anymore. But I really like to hybrid fish. Belton's a really good hybrid lake, using live shad, fishing out on the deep points.
Right.
We got a very good variety of catfish. The blues are great here.
Right.
They're in certain seasons. The yellow's running, which they're running now. So
yes.
Yellow's on live bait. and we got really good crappie in this lake. And so, yeah, Belton's a good all-around lake for any kind.
This weekend they're doing a Texas tournament zone, I believe, that's going on out there, and the what did you say? The swells are like 2 foot, and I mean the wind's crazy. A lot of us can't get our boats out this morning, which I thought would be a good time to do the podcast. But yesterday, I didn't tell you all this, but on Pee Wee's boat we caught a big crappie, like a slab crappie, on a jug, which we obviously threw back, and then a largemouth bass, and he was probably a good, he was legal keeping size, but. The soldiers and their families, getting to see that firsthand and just getting to see all the big catfish. We were pulling in 5-pounders like it was going out of style. I mean, it was just an amazing experience, I think. So it's just one of those things that fishing brings us together, but God brings us together, and this is just a great event, to kind of encompass all that.
Yeah, and when we first started this, we did mostly pole fishing.
Right, rod and reel. Right.
And we would take certain times that we'd go on Buchanan, and we would take everybody out, and we'd go after hybrids and stripers, and maybe go out and we'd chase the whites. And when we started dealing with the military, when we first started, all we did was male soldiers.
Okay, right.
And that was because of our housing arrangement and stuff. And so what we found out is when we got on the boat, and I got 4 soldiers on my boat, and you put a rod in each one of them's hands, it becomes a competition. The competition gets serious, and walls get put up, and somebody's bragging on themselves, and somebody's quiet because they didn't catch anything. They weren't good fishermen. So we found out when we started using the jugs, there's 2 things. When we get on the boat and we got jugs, everybody has their job. Right. So it takes everybody on the boat to catch every fish. So you become a team. So now you're high-fiving, you're breaking down walls. Right. You're opening up doors, and you get the opportunity to really learn about these guys and invest in their life. And also, jugging is really easy, so you take people out that's never caught fish. Right. Like I had a family on my boat yesterday, a man and his 2 small kids, and they got here late. We didn't have much time before we had to be back in for supper, so we ran out, got to check 5 jugs, and we brought in 4 fish. And so it's just boom, 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 three jugs right in a row with the fish, empty one, then the next one had a fish on it. It's like, wow, we fished all day, have never caught this many fish. Right. It keeps them exciting all day too.
And it catches enough for our fish fry tonight.
Yes, it does. Feed about 100
It's very efficient, to catching a lot of fish in a short amount of time. And I talked about jug fishing on the podcast that I did about my Delaware, Louisiana trip at the end of the show, and talked about Mudcat and how he kind of helped us get started with some of the Mudcat flagging jugs, which is what most of us use. But, the kids getting involved, which I'm huge about, on this show, and Dennis knows from listening, but it's one of those things where I'm big about making the outdoors more accessible for everybody and making the outdoors very, entertaining and inspirational and motivational for people. And the thing that I've noticed with the way that kids get involved in this stuff is that they're just as giddy as kids. I don't know how else to say it, but you see their fear of the water and that kind of stuff break down, and you see them really enjoy the experience. So, yeah,
absolutely.
So yeah, no, it's a great thing. Dennis, tell me a little bit. You're more of a black bass fisherman. You've got like a system down when we fish Conroe, because my son and I, watched you catch fish after fish after fish off of one dock, that was just holding a school of them. Tell us a little bit about your interest in bass fishing.
Yeah, so you make me sound better at it than I am.
You're really good at it, from what
First
I
of all.
see. No, I think you are.
I've only been fishing, like I said, since 2013, and because we do things backwards in my family, it was my kids that actually got me into fishing rather than vice versa.
I love it.
My kids got into it because some friends of theirs were into it, and there was a weekend I wasn't doing anything, and I'm like, well, let me just go out with them and see what this is like, because up to that point I kind of considered fishing one of those things you just kind of sit there with a rod in your hand and you don't do anything. Right. I'd never seen bass fishing before, so I didn't know that there's a lot of activity involved.
You never watched it on TV or anything like that?
Never watched it on
Okay.
TV or anything like that. Yeah, to me it was like watching golf on TV. I mean, it's probably fun to do, but it's not something you want to sit there and watch for 4 hours, right?
Now, the past couple of years, you've been watching the Bassmaster Classic, right?
I can't get enough enough.
I love it, man. It's great. It's great. It's awesome. So.
Yeah, my favorites are Major League Fishing and the Bass Pros. I don't miss a program of any of those. But
so you're hooked on it, yeah?
Yeah, I'm totally hooked on it. So I caught my first fish that was about the size of my hand, and I was hooked. And after that, I was buying rods, I was buying reels, and so now I'm at the point where I have my own boat, and I go fishing just about every weekend if I can.
Right.
I do like fishing for black bass, and for that reason, I come up to Belton a lot. Belton is a really good lake for that.
Right.
And I've got some, I've got a pretty good handle on where the fish are seasonally at Belton on any given time, so I can do that. I live like 10 minutes from Lake Georgetown, and that lake is known for white bass. So if I'm short on time, or if I just feel like catching a lot of fish that day, I'll hit that lake up and do the white bass. White bass are pretty prolific here at Belton too, so if I decide I want to change gears when I'm here at Belton, that's cool. I can do that. And yeah, those are the two primary lakes I fish, and I just have gotten locked into the seasonal patterns on those two lakes. I'm trying to learn Buchanan a little bit better.
That's a big lake, though. I mean,
it's
good for
lake.
all species of fish, but I mean, you got to really know where to find them on that lake.
Yeah, and the problem with Buchanan for me is that I have one of those tracker boats. It's pretty light, and you have to be really careful when the wind gets up about where you're at and where you're going. So, I have a friend with a house on LBJ. I'll go out there once in a while and fish with him. I can't profess to know that lake really well, so in a sense, while it seems like I really know what I'm doing, I think maybe on the lakes that I know well, I know what I'm doing, but I'm still learning. There's a lot to learn. I'm not anywhere near where I want to be yet.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. What's your go-to bait? Terry talked about what he fished with for catfish and stuff and white bass. I know you've got a go-to bait that you use all the time.
Yeah. So I usually carry 6 rods on the boat at least, but the 2 that are constant that I never change are I keep a rod with a paddle tail swim bait with a lead head jig.
I learned that from you actually. Is how to fish those.
Yeah, there are a couple brands I'm fond of, but we don't have to talk about those if you don't want to. The other one is the Strike King Rage Craw.
That's the one.
Texas rig.
I saw you catching those on Texas rigs and Conroe. I was like, this guy's on fire, man.
If you're in calm water, there's no better bait than that. The one thing I've learned is that the fish out here just chomp down on crawfish a lot, and if I'm not catching on the crawfish, I might switch to a worm, and the worm does pretty well. That's especially true here at Belton. I find myself switching to the worm here at Belton a lot more, but on most other lakes, I never switch out the crawfish.
Well, I've been bass fishing with you on this lake before. I think the last time we went, or maybe there's a time last year in April we went, and just had a great experience with, you were catching. You can go ahead and mention brands on the show. What brand of swim baits do you use? I know you're kind of particular to a couple of brands.
Yeah, I'm really fond of the Reaction Innovations paddle tail swim bait. Cool. It's called the Little Dipper or Little Shiner. I can't remember the precise name of it. It's the 4-inch version of that swim bait. It also comes in a 5-inch version, but I found the 4-inch version works better for me.
Cool.
I also like the Yum Money Minnow too, but
who's that made by?
That's the Yum.
Yum, okay.
Yeah, the Yum Money Minnow. Yeah. I'm not as fond of that, mostly because of the price. There's something about the action in that Reaction Innovation swim bait that just makes it really good. It's just hard to find in stores sometimes, so you have to be particular about where you go.
Or order it online. That's what a lot of anglers do these days. So I was going to give myself a hard time and have y'all both give me a hard time. We've caught 2 gar on this trip so far. I have not personally, but they've come in on jugs. And we're going to clean them during our fish cleaning party, and we're going to eat them tonight, right?
Yeah, fish disassembly party.
That's what Dennis calls it. I love that. I've never gotten old of that. All right, go ahead and give me a hard time.
About gar?
About gar. Everybody gives me a hard time. You might as well on this podcast. So
I can't give you a hard time because I ate it and it's pretty good.
It tastes pretty good.
They are good.
Yeah. It's all in the way you prepare it, though. I mean, a lot of people laugh at me, and I've never mentioned this on the show before, but I mean, I love to eat gar. That you got to get a pair of 10 snips or recips or something to get into the armor of the body, but once you get in there and split that open, you've got 2 lines of boneless, white meat.
2 back straps.
2 back straps like a deer, and it's fantastic eating. You just got to trim it up, get the red out, just like you would a white bass or something like that. that, and then cube it up and fry it. I mean, that's all I do.
Well, I think the biggest trick on that gar is we have a top-notch fish cooking team here.
Yes, and Terry's in charge of that team too. I'll go ahead and mention that. But no, that's great. So what we do at these events is catch a lot of catfish, and then I head up the fish cleaning team, which I've talked about on the show before, and been a new fan of Bubba Blade, doing the fish cleaning stuff with that. We just got some new electric knives, so we have kind of I started calling it a party once nobody wanted to come at first for fish cleaning, and then this is about 3 or 4 years ago. Rick started calling it a party, and everybody started showing up. I mean, everybody wanted to learn how to clean fish. Everybody wanted to, get the whole experience and everything down, and we're like begging to get a hold of a knife and cut a fish. And it's just the thing I love about all this is the outdoor camaraderie, is the fellowship we share with each other. And as a Christian man, that's one thing, but I mean, the fishing brings us all together in so many different ways, and it's just as a connection point for us, which I think is just ideally great. And Dennis is getting a selfie now of our podcasting. Good job, buddy. You gonna put that on Facebook and tag me later?
I am, yeah.
Good. No, that's good. So what else do y'all want to talk about? We've covered the basics of jug fishing is what I wanted to talk about on the show too. We use mud cut flagging jugs, which basically flag when they go up, and most of us use the boat I'm on right now uses a different jug, but they're working great. He uses kind of a plastic bottle, kind of a homemade deal. But we use cut shad, right?
Yes, fresh cut
shad, fresh dead a lot of times.
Yes.
Sometimes you can roll them in cornmeal and salt and preserve them in the freezer, but we like fresh cut shad, and finding shad on the lake sometimes is difficult, but we try to catch the week that we fish, right?
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay. And we typically do 3 hooks on a line, which in Texas is legal to go up to 5, right?
Yes.
And but the more hooks you put in that boat, the more challenging it gets, because somebody could get hooked very easily. I mean, that's your philosophy,
yes.
Right, Terry?
We used, when we started, we had 5 hooks, which was a legal limit on each jug, and it took 5 pieces of bait, normally 1 or 2 fish on a jug.
Right. So you're not really gaining anything.
You're not gaining
Right.
anything. You got a lot more tangles, a lot more twisted jugs. And
I didn't even think about that. That'd just be.
We use a good quality 5/0 circle hook, which costs about 80 cents a hook. So and then with the swivel and the split ring, they're about $1 a piece. So you're $2 every time you break a jug off.
Right.
Redoing it. So we went down to 3 hooks. It made it a lot simpler. And our whole weekend when we do the soldiers is keep it simple.
Right.
So 3 hooks out of 5 is a lot simpler, a lot less bait. We catch just as many fish.
Sure. And our whole deal this morning, I'm going to give a talk called The New Normal, and tomorrow Dennis is going to give a talk about keep it simple, or the simple message. And the neat thing about jug fishing is that you can do it in just about any boat. The boat that I was up against yesterday was a guy and his family. That the guy and his 2 kids were coming out. They were throwing out jugs, and they ended up docking about the same time we did, coming back, and then going to, and everything. I saw where they were setting jugs and stuff, and they just made a day trip out of it, and just put out some jugs, went to go fish, and then for bass, and they came back and picked them up. So you can do that. But the thing that's really neat is you've got a bass boat, and Terry, you've got a bay boat.
Yes.
And you can fish out of either one of them very efficiently. So it doesn't really matter what size of boat you have. I've even heard of people doing this in a kayak, but it's a little bit more challenging, that way. But it's really an accessible way to catch a lot of fish in a short amount of time. Would you all agree?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It requires very little in specialized gear, if at all.
Right. And you really want to watch, make sure that the kids and that kind of stuff don't handle the hooks. That's a rule on Pee Wee's boat this weekend, is making sure the kids don't handle the hooks, just to make sure we keep those hooks and everything safe on the floor when they're in the boat and elsewhere. It's interesting fishing on a pontoon boat because you're basically sitting from an elevated position. It's a little bit easier than a bay boat in a lot of cases, instead of having a kneel and everything. But a bass boat's the same deal, because you're basically just leaning over the boat and that kind of stuff. Sorry, I didn't mean to knock over your drink there. And so anyway, that's just something I wanted to mention as well. So, but it's basically pretty simple. I mean, you catch a really big fish, you get out the net, catch a lot of fish in a short amount of time. And for a ministry event like what we do here at Crosswater Outfitters, it's one of those things where you catch a you catch enough to feed everybody that night, and then possibly if there's enough left over, which there might be this weekend because we're catching the fish so good because of this front, there's stuff to send home too. And I mean, I just kind of think that overall is a great, is just a great experience, of not only catching and cleaning, but eating your catch at the same time. There's nothing better than the fish we have at these fish fries that we do. So.
No, I agree. You can't you can never overstate the how good it is to eat fresh caught fish. It just tastes so much better than anything you're going to get at the store or in a restaurant or anything like that. And I think for the families, I know this was something that I experienced on my first Crosswater Outfitters event. I think this is true for them as well. To see the entire life cycle I use the phrase life cycle because I can't come up with a better word.
Well, you're a tech guy too, and life cycle is used commonly in the IT world. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah. To see the fish go from the water to getting processed and then going to the dinner table.
Disassembled.
Disassembled. And then going to the dinner table, you get to see the whole thing, and I think it gives you a better appreciation for nature and how God provides for us through that process, and it's pretty fascinating.
Which is something that I'm always key on when you can work. God and the outdoors kind of goes together.
Sure.
But it's one of those things where you can actually show a real world example of here's how God's providing for us for our meal tonight. And we've always had enough fish. Sometimes we'll have to go and people will bring some and stuff like that from home or whatever. But we always eat well at these events. We've got a cook team and everybody, Ed and Melinda and that whole group doing their thing, and it's fantastic. I mean, I can't say enough good stuff about it.
Yeah, it's undeniable watching that process at play.
Right, and then we do s'mores for the kids in the evenings. We do after our meals. Are we doing that just Friday and Saturday or both? Or just...
Sometimes we do both. I think we just try to get a feel for what everybody
they want to do. Okay, that's what I figured. So, but it's fantastic, and I mean, I think these kind of events, the more I can get, and obviously we need reliable men with boats. So reliable men with boats, we need to grow the ministry and that kind of stuff, but it's growing pretty exponentially, Terry, from when you first started,
Yes, it has. And, I sat down many years ago and I was talking to somebody on a retreat I was at. We was talking about the ministry and focused on what we was looking at coming out of it. And one thing is growing in. I ran into this person several years later, and he's talking, well, how's the fishing ministry going? And I had to sit back and think for a minute, and then I thought, we really have grown a bunch.
Right.
Because we went from like 4 or 5 guys
right.
that was solid with boats that now we probably got close to 20 captains with boats.
Right, depending on what event we do.
Yes, yeah. And so every event we have, all of them can't make every event, but usually when we have a big event like this, we have no problem getting 12 or 13 boats.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of solid guys, a lot of solid deckhands. We got a top-notch cook team, picking up a few sponsors. You noticed all the drinks and stuff over here, and all the snacks for the kids. All that is sponsored.
Great.
That stuff is there for every one of them we have now. We have a Jugging for Jesus coming up in June, which we target single parent families, families that can't afford a vacation. We do them at screen shelters and tents. We kind of do it the same way. And this place has donated a lot of stuff for it, so the cost for us is a lot less.
Oh, it's great. And I went to Jugging for Jesus. The only one I've been to is March of 2014, and I had a blast. I mean, it's a little more low-key than the soldier events and those kind of things, but it's a little more intimate, too. I mean, the way we do devotions and those kind of things, it's just very, and the kids are very much a focus, and, it's just one of those things where it's just been, so that's kind of an offshoot of our ministry, correct?
Yes, it is. And the last one we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 kids that was junior high and down.
Oh, my goodness.
So, it was a big kid turnout. In the middle of Saturday, we're a fishing ministry. In the middle of Saturday, it's mandatory that you show up for the water balloon fight. And we probably busted 1,000 water balloons or better, not including the big water pistols everybody showed up with.
That's more outdoor entertainment than just hunting and fishing.
I'm going to tell you, them kids had a blast because we bring quite a few kayaks. That's always a big hit at Jugging for Jesus. We have the big water balloon fight, and it's so cool because you're out most of these families are out in a different environment. And I think the kids are surprised because they probably never had a water balloon fight with their mom and dad. But you know what? It ain't just the kids. It's all the mom and dads and all our staff in the middle of it. Everybody's throwing water balloons.
Getting
and everybody's
drenched.
getting hit. And it's like, wow, this is great. My mom never done this with me before.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I love it. No, that's great. And I mean, it's about bringing families together in that regard.
Yes, it is.
Just like it is kind of at these events. And that's why I'm so grateful. When I first started doing CWO stuff, it was just the men, like you were talking about.
Yes.
And then I noticed the families and stuff. And you just get to see that connection, that familial connection that they have with each other and how that grows and strengthens over the weekends. And we see we basically see the soldiers a lot of times have a life transformation experience because of the outdoors.
Yes.
And that's why I love the ministry work that I do with you guys so much, because it's one of those things where you get to see in person how this stuff works. And I mean, that's my encouragement. If no matter where you're listening to this, if there's some way you can give back, I'm always big about giving back. And this is a way that Dennis and Terry and I give back, because we've been so blessed. We're blessed to be a blessing. And I think that goes without saying too.
It is, and personally, we get to sit down and see some of the impact it has on the soldiers. There's probably a lot more impact on the soldiers that happened after they're gone
the
and
event,
we don't
right.
see them. Mm-hmm. And we got a real good website where you can tell them the address on it, and we got a devotion on there. Billy's still on there, right?
Yep, we sure do. Yep.
And we had a soldier that came that he did not want to come. He wanted nothing to do with anything spiritual. And the chaplain stayed on him. They got him out here. He was really dark, standoffish.
Right.
And he was he was in the process of being put out of the military with dishonorable discharge.
Right.
And so he was losing all his benefits. Mm-hmm. Well, after he came to our Crosswater ministry, he gave his life to Christ. His life was changed. Several of our guys wrote letters to who it might concern at Fort Hood over him. The chaplain did. And he was brought in front of a big commander and sat down and said, looking at your record, I would have never went back and looked at your stuff.
Not a second chance.
Not a second chance, and reversed it. He says, but I had to go back and look because all these letters and stuff that was wrote about you and the life change and how great of a guy you are, and they reinstated him and gave him 100% of all the stuff and gave him an honorable discharge.
Wow.
So, what a huge change in Billy's life. And, I can't even imagine what God has done in Billy's family's life.
Right.
They knew what was happening to him. Then all of a sudden, this guy comes to a spiritual retreat weekend and he's totally changed.
Yeah, he's changed like forever.
To a great man now.
Right, and the benefits from that, and that all starts with the outdoors and what we do in this ministry.
Yes, it
I mean,
does.
that's just fantastic. It's just one of those things that I think it's life transformational, but it's also very simple. Yes. And very, it's not easy to pull all these people together and do all these events, but I still think it's worth it. I mean, a lot of people will ask me when I talk about the ministry work that we do, is it worth your time? Is it worth it? And absolutely, because I've said this before on the show. It's one of those things. The legacy that you leave behind.
Yes.
The impression that you implant in people's hearts can last them a whole lifetime. You may be the only Bible they ever read. I've heard that too. So I think that's very wise there too. So Dennis?
Yeah, the return on investment, and there's another tech term for you.
ROI.
The return on investment's difficult to measure, but it's undeniable when you see it in person.
Yes.
I look around the room right now, and you can see walls being broken down and relationships being formed right now as we're recording this podcast. And I can't think of any more rewarding way to see the impact of what it is that we're doing out here than to just watch that.
Yeah,
I could sit in the corner of this room the whole weekend and just watch that happen.
Well, and it's got to work. It's not just us showing up with boats and going out and fishing and everything. It's one of those things where it's all encompassing. It all brings it all together. That kind of stuff. So. Any other fishing tips for us on these Central Texas lakes? Because, like I say, it's been a while since I've done a freshwater show, so this is kind of going to stand for it right now. So
yeah, I would guess at this point that the white bass are on their way out of the rivers and starting to pile up on those main lake humps that are outside those. If the wind wasn't 78 miles per hour right now,
like it is,
I'd be out there taking a look at those right now.
Right.
Yeah, I think black bass are moving up to spawn. I imagine if we went out there and saw what was happening with the bass tournament, they're probably all back up in the backs of coves.
Yeah, where it's wind protected from the wind, right?
Yeah. Looking at spawn beds and stuff like that. But eventually, I imagine pretty soon those guys are going to start moving out. The water temperature seems to be a little cooler than I thought it would be for April.
Right.
It was in the high 60s out here yesterday. I would have expected it to be in the 70s already. So I think that's a testimonial to kind of the weird winter we've had.
Right.
Seems like we've had a weird winter one way or the other the last 3 years. So yeah. So those are the best tips I could give you.
Okay, that's cool. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So and when we set jugs, we typically try coves and there's all kinds of different places you can do it, but
yeah.
Points, obviously. I mean, any place you normally catch them, and then river channels, especially when we're on Conroe and these really big lakes.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of river channels.
Okay.
I like finding the river channels and dropping them in there, especially if there's submerged timber nearby.
Right. And I haven't gone in this much detail about jug fishing and how and where you set, so I just wanted to cover that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, these are the kinds of places that are a little tough to rod and reel fish. You can, unless you're dropping a rig straight down. But I love dropping jugs in river channels, especially if there's a bend and there's some submerged timber nearby.
You need your electronics for that.
For
that. Depth and for structure.
Yeah, if you have down scan, you're in good shape. If you have side scan, that's probably even better. I don't happen to have side scan on my boat, but. I look for that submerged timber. There was a while there for a couple of events here. I would go all the way up into Cowhouse Creek, and I was just running straight along the river channel. It just wasn't working for me, so I came back out into the main lake this time.
Okay.
I'd found a river channel bend that had worked for me in the past. It's got some submerged timber, not right nearby, but it's probably about 30 yards off the channel. And I've been catching a lot of small catfish. It seems like I had a school of baby catfish come through and hit all my jugs yesterday, but I'm getting a lot more fish now. But those are always good. I know a lot of guys have success on points. I have not. There's something about points I haven't figured out yet. Maybe Terry could talk about that a little bit. But I'm a big fan of river channel bends.
Okay. I wanted to mention that.
I think on jug fishing, on any lake that you go to, if you have a map and you can look at the rivers that was there when they formed the lake.
When they formed the lake, right.
Even though they're silted in and stuff, they've been there forever, and that's like a roadway for the fish.
Right.
So catfish travels in riverbeds. Mm-hmm. So they'll travel up and down, so you find the riverbeds, and what you do is you go on the side and catch them coming down, or you come down the side of a point or a sandbar or something, and them catfish come down like you're going on the road, and they come up on the sand flats to eat.
Right.
And so
that's where you want to put your bait.
So anywhere you want to go on the jug, on any lake you're at, you're jug fishing, the first thing you want to do is get an idea where the river channel is, and you fish the river channel or right off of the river channels.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. No, that's good. And then that's where a lot of the big boys live too. And they run those road beds and stuff.
And the big boys move a lot more in the winter looking for bait than they do the summer.
Okay.
Also in the winter, when they go out, people think you got to have big bait, big fish. The bigger the bait, the more energy it takes to digest it and everything. And we'll go out and catch 40, 50, 60, 80-pound catfish on a piece of cut shad that's the size of a quarter.
Right. Yeah. I've seen that. One of our ministry partners used to call it an appetizer. It's just a little piece of a shad. Yes. But I've seen this. I was just going to mention that. It's like 40, 50-pound catfish and, off a little bitty piece of a shad. And you're like, how did it – because it takes less energy. That makes sense to me. I didn't even think about that before. It takes less energy to digest that and everything like that. So it's not always big bait, big fish, although I've heard a lot of fishing guys say that that's true. Not always. So that's a good point.
Yeah. What Terry said about contour mapping is that's good advice for any kind of fishing, right? Not just catfishing. When I upgraded my fish finders on my boat, one of the biggest benefits I got the second biggest benefit I got was downscan. I can't understate the importance of that, but the contour mapping on the GPS
to see where the river channel is.
It's just key. It's key. I could never find river channels out there if it weren't for that. Right. So if you're a guy out there and you're looking at making upgrades to your electronics on your boat, you've got to make sure that you get that GPS and invest in one of those map chips.
Right. No, that's good.
It's good stuff. It can't be beat, really.
No, it's solid. And then the depth that we're putting most of our jugs in for the most part, Terry.
You know, all in all, throughout the year, the magic number that we find is always about 25 foot.
Okay, that's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to speak for you because you've been at this a lot longer than
25 foot's the magic number. Now, out yesterday, we was in a little bit shallower water and was catching a little bit better, but overall, 80% of the time, 25 foot.
25 foot, okay.
Yes, sir.
Or in that range at least.
In that range, yes.
Plus or minus 25 foot, that's great.
Yeah.
Anything else to add, guys?
I think you covered it pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you for having us.
No, thank you for doing this live on the spot here. And I apologize to everybody. There's a lot of background noise, but I thought it was a real deal experience, to have you guys on and do something, like this. So thank you guys for having us.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you guys for what y'all do for the ministry, for the boats that you provide, for our leadership that y'all provide. I mean, I can't say enough about that. So.
It's our pleasure.
That's great. And there they go, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Terry Tubbs and Dennis Martin from the Crosswater Outfitters Fishing Ministry that I'm dearly a part of, and try to attend as many events as I can during the year, I should say, on weekends that I have those. And then obviously I also serve with Camp Agape, the bereavement camp for children, and some other stuff that I do in the outdoor. I say this on this podcast a lot, but there's a whole lot to be said about giving back. We've been a blessing. We're blessed to be a blessing in this world and in this industry and everything. And I've been so humbly blessed by God, but in so many different ways. This is just one of my ways to give back. So that's the whole reason why I do this show, and as a way to give back to you, the listener, and as a way to just inform you, educate you, motivate you, so you can go out and have the best of the outdoors for yourself. So again, if you've not done so already, subscribe to our newsletters. There are 3 of them a week. Tuesday is Tactical Tuesday, Wednesday is Wildlife Wednesday, and Thursday is the Texas State of the Outdoor Nation. And then we also have our fishgame.com content, which this podcast is part of. So you can check out the Voice of the Texas Outdoor Nation, or the National News of Texas, as we call it, at fishgame.com. And Texas and beyond, we cover all kinds of wildlife stuff and all kinds of different stuff that Chester Moore, editor-in-chief, curates on there. And it's fantastic, self-defense, tactical, that kind of stuff. Really good stuff. So plan to have Matt Williams back on pretty soon. He's a bass expert. Talk about some more freshwater bass fishing stuff. And really, we've got some great things planned for this show. So I can't thank you guys enough for watching and reading and listening. Thank you so much for tuning in and checking us out, and have an awesome day in the outdoors. We'll see you next time.